Hello, my name is Patrick Usher, and in this video, despite having a virus at the moment, I will be discussing the process of recovery from POTS syndrome using the DNRS. Okay, this is an important topic. Really, this is a slight departure from the other videos where I'm mainly talking about an hypothesis for POTS, that it's caused by limbic system impairment. But in this video, I want to discuss the actual process of recovery, kind of what to expect if you do decide to embark on that dynamic neural retraining system journey, which is a very special one. Now, the first thing to talk about is skepticism. Okay, when I ordered the program, I was highly skeptical of it, and although I was, going to give it a go, I thought it might help or whatever. But I was very skeptical of it. In fact, when I was unwell at its worst for those 3 or 4 months in 2015, I'm lucky it was such a short time, really, to be very unwell. I came across it. It occurred to me that it was all an elaborate hoax. Looking back now, it must have been pretty elaborate for them to go to all that effort. But anyway, so I was very skeptical of it. And that's the first thing. So you may be skeptical of it. And the second thing connected with that is that your skepticism may increase because the exercises on the face of it appear rather simple, even though there's a lot of science behind them and there's a lot of discipline required. I'll talk about discipline in a moment. But you may be skeptical because the exercises appear simplistic. Okay? Now, the most important thing to bear in mind, if you do think that, is that there's a reason why they are simplistic, and that is that the limbic system is a simple beast. Okay? The limbic system is simplistic. Obviously, from a neurological and scientific point of view, it's immensely complex, but in terms of what the limbic system cares about, okay, what it actually cares about, it is a simple beast, and it cares about simple things. Okay, so from that point of view, the fact that the dynamic neural retraining system isn't getting you to do something all kind of complicated and shit, okay, it's actually getting you to do something which is quite simple, quite a lot, and quite often with a lot of repetition and discipline, that's good. That means it's speaking in the language of the limbic system. So the simpler you can make the exercises, the better. Okay, so if that's an initial point of skepticism for you, remember that actually that's good. It's good that they're simple. That means they're speaking to the limbic system, which is a simple part of the brain in terms of what it cares about, in the right language for the limbic system. Okay. Now, I'd hope, by the way, just a little aside, that skepticism that you may have might be mediated by or ameliorated by the hour-long talk on this channel, in which I try and put forward why I think the limbic system is the root cause of the condition, and also by the book POTS syndrome, what it really is and why it happens. So both of those resources, if you kind of agree or are potentially interested in the idea that that is what causes POTS, I would hope that both of those resources could act as a guide to give you confidence in what you're doing. Okay, so I hope that would help with the skepticism aspect. Okay, the next important thing is discipline. This is so important. When I look back now at how I went about recovery and how a lot of people go about recovery, I'm truly humbled at the discipline that I stuck with. Now, the following is just a sort of typical example of a day I would have had. I mean, it did vary, and life events did necessarily mean that sometimes I couldn't do this, but by and large, 75% of the time, basically, I would do an hour at around 8 a.m. of the practice, 45 minutes at 12, 45 minutes at 5, and 20 minutes before bed, okay? And in between times, you're also meant to block what are known as pathways of the past, and I'd do a mini visualization for each of those. So when you add all that up, you're looking at around close to 3 hours of practice just in the main sections, 8 a.m., 12, 5, and before bed, but also another 30 to 40 minutes throughout the day. So I was doing a lot of visualizations. and I really stuck with it. And I wound down in the last month of the 6 months because I was pretty much fine at that point, and I wanted to give myself a bit of a break. But up until that point, I made strong use of my Type A personality, which is appalling, and I used it to good effect. And essentially, it was a kind of monastic schedule that I set up for myself. So, it actually helped me to imagine that I was a monk, okay, and that at 8 o'clock the bells were ringing, and I had to get there, and I had to do my practice. I had to drop whatever else I was doing. So, I was talking to my dad or whatever. I'd be like, "Okay, I'm sorry, I've got to go now. The bells are calling," or whatever. Uh, and that really helped. And I do think it's very important to get into that and start early in the day. Don't let it drift. Get up and do it. Get up, have a cup of tea, decaffeinated tea. That's important, as I go into in another video. Get up, have some tea, and then do it. But start early. Start the day as you mean to continue. It's very important. So, discipline. And once you get into that, you actually will stick with it. That's the thing. I mean, by and large, 75% of the time. Because once you get that momentum, you become proud of yourself for the achievements for the hours you are putting in. And it gets on a roll. And I have no idea if I could do it now, but I could do it then because I had to. But once you get into that momentum, it becomes easier. And in fact, you wouldn't actually stop doing it once you get into it. Okay, so really put in the time. Clear the decks, simplify your life. It's all about the brain rewiring. Okay, it's about the brain rewiring and getting back into enjoying life. That's what those 6 months are about. Okay, so clear the decks, simplify your life. It's unlikely that you'd have many engagements anyway, but don't have them. Obviously see people, but you know what I mean. Anyway, make it simple. I suggest quasi-monastic and get on with it. Get into the momentum and enjoy it. Okay, and make it a priority. It's very important. What else would I say on the process of recovery? I have some notes here. Yes, in terms of sort of the process of recovery, what to expect in terms of when you kind of start to get better. The answer to that is it really varies from person to person. And some people start to get better pretty quickly. Others find that they feel emotionally better for a period, let's say a month, and then they start to physically get better. So it kind of varies. It also depends on how long you've been unwell before you started. There are different factors. But regardless of all that, you will get better. I mean, there are cases that you can read about or watch. There's one that just came into my mind right there of a very brave lady who had not POTS syndrome, but electromagnetic hypersensitivity syndrome. Linda, I think her name is. Her story is featured in the Annie Hopper book, Wired for Healing. And she had chemical sensitivity and electromagnetic hypersensitivity for over 30 years before starting the DNRS. And she was in her 60s when she started. And it took her 18 months of brain rewiring to get better. But the thing is, she got better. Okay? So it doesn't matter where you're starting from, but you stick with it. If anything, that story of all of them really proves this is on to the real deal. So it might be that your brain has got, you've been like this for a long time. And I was lucky that, I'd only had it severely for 3 or 4 months and sort of in a more insidious way for about 1.5 years before that. But nevertheless, no matter how long you've had it, your brain will get there eventually. So stick with it. Having said that, most people, recover within 6 months, and that's the standard recommendation. So in terms of that, what tends to happen is there's a lot of up and down at the start, okay? That old adage of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back really does apply. And you mustn't worry about that. It's just what's going to happen, okay? Certainly that was the case for me in the first 2 months, although my condition stabilized hugely as soon as I started doing the program. Within a week, it started to stabilize. And although I still felt weak and not up to scratch and yada yada, I'd wake up and I didn't have the fear of, oh my God, what's actually going to happen to me today? Am I going to seriously crash? Am I going to have a severe reaction to food? All those kind of things that you worry about, the temperature regulation problems, all that kind of stuff. That fear was gone pretty quickly. So even though I was still kind of a convalescent, as it were, that stabilization happened pretty quickly, and that was really, really good. And then in my case, after about the 2 month mark, so between 2 and 4 months, things got so much better. And I'd say after about 3 months, I woke up and I just knew that things were permanently different. And that was a great feeling. Yeah, permanently different. And so that moment will come. So just trust, keep rewiring your brain, and you get there. The other thing to say is, of course, that's very pertinent to people who are recovering from POTS, is that it's a twofold process, okay? Unlike, well, things like multiple chemical sensitivity are also a twofold process, but they're primarily neurological because they're primarily affecting the smell centers. Whereas in POTS, the smell centers in the brain can be affected from a secondary point of view, but you're primarily concerned with how certain neurological problems, i.e. the hypothalamus, which is causing the constant release of adrenaline due to it being in a state of hypervigilance, and how that constant release of adrenaline has led to the net protein deficiency throughout the body. That's the real thing going on in POTS. So you have a twofold thing: the actual neurological problem, neurological crisis, and then you have the problem with the net deficiency, which is what causes the blood vessel constriction. Okay, and if this is the first video you've watched of mine, the main lecture goes into why the crisis in the limbic system causes net deficiency. Okay, so watch that if you're confused by what I'm talking about. Okay, so you have a twofold thing. So it's quite conceivable that actually you do the dynamic neural retraining system and the adrenaline supply gets shut off quite quickly. Okay, and you feel much better because of that. In my case, it happened within a week. Now, however, that gets switched off, but the net protein is still deficient because it takes a long time. Well, not a long time, but several months. I don't know exactly how long. There are no studies on it. But the net protein is situated in soft muscle, which is a part of the body which is replaced very frequently when the nervous system is operating under normal circumstances. So it will be replaced, but it may take several months. So you switch off the neurological problem, but the net protein still takes time to heal. So you still have the symptoms of a somewhat increased heart rate from lying down to standing because the net protein hasn't healed. Okay, your overall heart rate should come down because you're not having the waves of adrenaline, okay, being released all the time, but you'll still have that 30 beats per minute increase, okay, even though you'll feel better. But to just bear that in mind, and you'll also feel somewhat on edge because the net protein hasn't healed up, so there's kind of adrenaline seeping around and doing stuff that it shouldn't be doing, okay? So bear that in mind is a key thing to say. You're really looking at, I'd say, a good 3 or 4 months. I'd say it would be impossible to feel back to yourself complete, or enough, unless you've done 3 or 4 months of brain rewiring. And it's important to say that just when you get that adrenaline switched off, do not stop doing the brain rewiring. You do the brain rewiring for 6 months regardless, because you need to get your limbic system into a hardwired, non-traumatic state. You don't want to do it for a week, have the adrenaline switch off, only to find that a few weeks later it comes back. Okay, so and then the net protein has no chance of healing. So you need to keep it going for 6 months, regardless. Okay, so that's something else to say about all that. Right. During the recovery process, exercise is important, of course. Cardiovascular reconditioning is important. Cardiovascular deconditioning does contribute to having a higher heart rate upon standing from getting up from lying down, undoubtedly. So, do build up the exercise, build it up sensibly. If you've been doing no exercise for years, start with 10 minutes a day for a week, and then 15 minutes, and then 20 minutes. Go like that. I built up to kind of typically 45-minute walks every day, plus some other kind of physio exercises, Pilates and yoga, that kind of thing. And that was fine. And it's only laterally that I've started to get into more serious exercise. Okay, so build up exercise sensibly. Don't overdo it, but do challenge yourself appropriately. Okay. Once you have recovered, fingers crossed. Okay, you have recovered. You've done your 6 months. Brilliant. What happens then? Well, life is not plain sailing. Even when you've done a wonderful program like the DNRS, it's not plain sailing. Shit happens. Life is tough. bad things can happen. Okay, I'm saying that, to sort of, I think there's a kind of DNRS trap that some people can get into. And I don't think this is controversial to say. I think people would agree with me. People who organise the DNRS would agree. Actually, there can be a trap in that people do the 6 months and they've essentially recovered from the neurological elements, the physical elements. They're better, but because they don't feel 100%, they feel like they have to keep on going with the exercises forever. Okay. This, I think, is a trap because no one's ever going to feel 100%. Ever. I didn't feel 100% before I had POTS. I've never felt 100% since I was about 6. Okay. So, people don't. It's a myth. It's only in the movies that people feel that. So I think it's an important point. So, the main thing is to recover from POTS, to recover from the autonomic dysfunction, and to recover from other limbic system impairments if you have them, like chemical sensitivity. That's the aim of the DNRS. It's not to become superhuman, okay? I think that's an important point to make. So once you recover, you may feel that you're at about 75%. That's where I feel I'm at, okay? I have a virus at the moment as well, so I'm a little bit lower than that. But anyway, you feel at about 70-75%. You may feel a bit more or less, but whatever. But anyway, the thing is that that's fine. You don't have the massive heart rate increases. You're not sensitive to chemicals. You've done it. Well done. You can move on. Okay. Of course, they're lovely exercises to do, and I have gone back to them at various times. I'll talk about that in a moment. But you don't feel like you have to keep doing it to get to 100% because you'll never get there. Okay. So you may find you still have to live within limits, and that's fine. Okay. The main thing is you won't have POTS. Now, there have been times over the year and 15, sorry, over the 15 months since I finished my 6 months rewiring, that I have occasionally had to go back to the exercises. Okay. On 2 occasions, I had to go back because I'd started to notice that the adrenaline was going off again in a very light way, in a very manageable way, but it was nevertheless happening. And on both occasions, it happened for a reason, due to traumatic or quasi-traumatic circumstances that were occurring. Okay, and also mixed in on one occasion with a period of silly overwork. Okay, so that was a lesson, a big lesson for me. Because I have a terrible type A personality, absolutely dreadful, appalling. Okay, that's why I've done this flipping book on POTS syndrome when I should have forgotten all about it and moved on, right? Anyway, so the thing is, so I had to go back, and I'm not saying at that point I was keeling over. It wasn't like that. It was just that these were warning signs, and I needed to cut them off at the pass. Okay, which I did. So sometimes you have to go back, and that's quite a common thing you read about. Sometimes people have to go back for a few weeks, and that's fine. Okay, and the other thing is, it's also nice sometimes to revisit the exercises because they also can be very emotionally healing as exercises to do. And sometimes I do them, or I just do one when I wake up in the morning, or one when I'm going to sleep at night, and it's very, very pleasant to do. And I'd love to do the dynamic neural retraining system again one day, properly. But not as a kind of I need to recover from an illness, but just to do it because I think it's at an emotional level, it's profoundly healing as well, and it would be nice to do it without the kind of oh my god, am I going to recover? Am I not going to recover? That kind of thing. It would be lovely. It's a very special program. It's a very special program. This is just a little edit just to put in at this point. Once you hopefully recover from POTS and the other related conditions using the DNRS. And although, of course, it's very nice to go back to the program, and sometimes it's necessary, I think in general, it's probably not in terms of a kind of approach to, let's say, thoughts and feelings in general. It's not necessarily the best thing to do from a psychological point of view, primarily. Okay, I think it should. Once you recover it, it can be happy. It can be helpful from a secondary point of view, okay? But I think primarily because our emotional lives and what goes through our heads can be so complex, and so multifaceted that a better approach to develop once you have recovered is acceptance. Okay, is a lot of acceptance and self-compassion for what you feel and think. Okay, and of course that can be part of the DNRS, but if you know, it's kind of a complicated story which you'd understand if you got the program. But I think in general terms, um, it's probably not good as a kind of primarily as a way to maintain psychological health in the long term. Okay, it's very good at doing what it does, which is rewire the limbic system from trauma. But in the long term, a kind of more acceptance-based approach, I think, is probably healthier. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say about that. Now back to the main narrative. Now, of course, once you've recovered and you're feeling whatever you're feeling, you might feel at 100%. Fair play if you do. But if you're not, there are other ways, there are other kind of modalities to look into. It's a great thing, and you can take your time with them because the main problems have been dealt with. So, I'm looking into other things myself now because I'm interested in kind of getting from 70% to 80 or 85%. My diet is not very good in that I love sugar, so I'm trying to give that up. That's my 2017 thing. I know that will make a big difference because in the past it has made a big difference to me. I'm also interested in this Buteyko breathing technique, which I'm only learning about, which I think is quite exciting. So we'll see where that goes. So there are other things you can do. Like, don't feel like you have to do the DNRS forever. Okay. Last thing is, I just mentioned there that whole sort of, will I recover? Won't I recover? All that kind of anxiety. I had that a lot, especially at the start. But even and everyone does. Okay. Just ignore it, basically. But even later on, at the 4-month mark when my standing heart rates were like 84 and it was increasing by between 15 to 20 beats for the most part, from lying down to standing, I'd still think, oh my God, have I got better? Because that's what the brain does. It's perverse. It's absolutely perverse. Okay, so give yourself a break. Just keep doing the exercises and don't worry about it too much. And the other thing is, oh yeah, and you may still have, look, I don't like thinking of the time I had POTS. I find it puts me in a very vulnerable position. So that's not going to change because something terrible did happen to you. Okay, there's no doubt about that. There may be ways to reframe it, and so on and so forth, and ways to grow as a human being from having had such a terrible thing happen to you. But I'm always going to feel vulnerable about that time, and that's another thing that happens post-recovery, is that when you think back to those times, it's hard. It's very hard. And I don't like it. But, and I still get nervous if people mention the word pot or pots. I really do. I have a nervous twitch. I put it that way as a joke, but generally speaking, I really do not like discussions of it. Flower pots, teapots, pots and pans, all of that kind of stuff. It does make me nervous. I don't like thinking about it. Well, why'd you write a book on it, Patrick? I don't know. God help us. Anyway, I suppose it's kind of exposure, what is it, one of those CBT things where you expose yourself to what you're afraid of. Write a book on it. Great. Anyway, I have to say I didn't always like writing that book. In fact, I didn't like writing it much of the time because it's a terrible topic. Show that. Autonomic nervous system dysfunction is not what you should spend your days thinking about or contemplating. It's awful. Okay? So I would profoundly encourage you to go do the dynamic neural retraining system, recover from POTS, and not write a book on it. Okay? Don't do it. Just relax and enjoy your life. So those are various thoughts on the recovery process from POTS. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it encourages you to, if you're on the fence, to go and give the DNRS a go. And I wish you the best of luck with it. And I really hope that it brings you health and recovery and a second life. So thank you very much. Goodbye.